The committee. Chris, do we have any members in the chamber this morning?
No, we don't, Chair.
Thank you. Just to remind members that this meeting is able to be viewed live by members of the public and press today. Therefore, may I welcome anyone that may be watching remotely. A recording of this meeting will be made available on the Council's YouTube channel after the meeting is concluded, should anyone else wish to view it. Just to confirm, as a Council, we welcome the use of the Welsh language within our public meetings, but I can confirm that I have not received any notification or request to use Welsh today. Therefore, the meeting will be conducted in English only. As a reminder, may I remind members to refrain from using the chat facility and instead use the raise hand icon to indicate when you want to speak. Please, could you also keep your microphones muted when not speaking, so there aren't any interruptions encountered. Could Geraint, our Democratic Services Officer, confirm that we have received any apologies, or is it Chris?
It's me today, Chair. No apologies, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Chair, sorry, I just received apologies this morning from Councillor Overton, and Councillor Janet Jones confirmed that she'll be running late, so she's got a site meeting.
Oh, yeah. Thanks very much for that. That takes us to agenda item 2, the declarations of interest. Can I ask members in alphabetical order to state whether they have any declarations of interest to declare? Councillor Burnett, I don't think he's on yet, is he? Councillor Curran? Councillor Evans?
Not that I'm aware of, Chair.
Councillor Jones is non. Councillor Killick? Sorry, your microphone's off, John.
None, Chair, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Overton isn't here. Councillor Powell?
None from me.
Councillor Thomas?
None from me, Chair, thank you.
Victoria Haller?
None from me, thank you.
And Michelle isn't with us. And I just like to declare that I have grandchildren in Esgol Guffin Glynllw and Esgol Gymraeg Cwmbran.
Apologies, Chair, you just reminded me, Michelle Jones sends her apologies for this morning, and I think Councillor Karen confirmed yesterday, didn't he?
Oh, yeah.
The meeting.
Yeah,
So,
he's got a pension. He's got a pensions meeting. I forgot about that. Thank you, Leanne. Okay, that takes us to the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of September, page 3 to 7. Just to remind members, these minutes relate to the report we received on the local authority's procedure for planning of school places. Please could I ask members to confirm that the minutes are an accurate account of the meeting? Yeah. Anyone against? Any abstentions? They're confirmed. Anybody any points to bring up on those minutes? No, thanks very much. That takes us to the action sheet. Please could I ask members to confirm if they have any questions or whether they are happy with the action sheet. Similarly, I think John Killick, you wanted a question?
Yes, please. Action point 3.1. Members requested that schools were asked for their observations as to whether the gap between free school meals and non-free school meal pupils changed noticeably, in fact, and are changing noticeably during the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly in relation to English and maths. We had a response back which said that officers have not been able to get into the schools. I'm really annoyed at that response because I don't actually understand the point that's being made. I quite accept that officers may not be able to get into schools, but the minute there quite clearly says that they were asked for their observations from schools. Now, to ask for an observation from school is purely to get, in my view, an intuitive response from 31 head teachers about, I think it's 31, about whether or not there has been a significant difference or any difference at all in the gap between free school meal pupils and non-free school meal pupils. If they have, then in my view, we should be doing something about it now to address that and not be waiting another 6 months' time until officers can get into the school. The getting into school is a total irrelevance.
Thank you, John. Do you have a comment on that, Dermot?
Try and unmute myself for once. Thanks, Councillor Killick. I think that probably wasn't the most balanced response we could have given. So I think where we're at the moment, Julian and I are in the process of meeting with the vast majority of schools, looking at the school development plans, and we are asking about free school meals. It's one of those issues clearly that not only committee but obviously officers are really concerned about in terms of historically our performance for free school meal learners in the borough and of course nationally. So we're also meeting, I think, with the head teacher strategic group later today. So we'll take that question into that strategic group, which I think Julian's after this meeting later on, and we'll come back with perhaps a more fuller response and ask heads to contribute in terms of their views. The strategic group's got about, I think it's 7 or 8 different head teachers representing all the different sectors. So we'll start there and we'll come back with a better response.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Dermot. Thank you, John. And
Actually, I think you might want to just add to that.
Yeah, Julian?
Just to add as well, John, there is a further complication with that because basically national testing this year was on a best endeavours basis. So for a lot of schools, it didn't actually take place and it's not comparable as well. So the information that schools actually are holding in terms of end of key stage assessments, for instance, can't be used to make any comparative judgments or statements. So there is a real difficulty in this. And then if you ask them to make what would basically be a gut feeling, again, it's going to vary from school to school depending on how much face-to-face learning has gone on and has been able to go through the blended learning route and everything. So it's not a straightforward question to be able to answer, unfortunately, at the moment.
Chair, can I make a response to that, please?
Yes.
I mean, from my point of view, it is something that a head teacher can make, to use your word, a gut response to. I would say an intuitive response to, on the basis that there are staff who are able to make that sort of intuitive response, never mind head teachers. We have some wise head teachers who will be able to say one way or the other. And I'm quite honestly at a loss as to why we can't just ask them. I'm not asking for them to write a report. I'm really just asking for them to give to you an intuitive response on whether they think that that gap has risen or has increased over the last 18 months. Because if it has, by the time some of the meetings that were just referred to have taken place, it seems another few months will have gone by. By the time those few months have gone by, it'll take us another few months to decide what we're doing. It'll be about 2 years between when that increase, that gap, which I hear from school staff has increased. It'll be 2 years between when that gap started to increase and when we start to do something about it. And in my view, that isn't good enough.
Thank you, John. I'm sure officers have taken that on board. Leanne, you wanted to come in?
Just on a separate issue, really. With regards to the last action on your action sheet on page 15, Mark Horton has now sent those figures through. And I forwarded them onto the committee at the end of last week, I think it was. If the committee is in agreement, we'll now remove this action from the action sheet because it's completed.
Yes. Thank you, Leanne. I think we can agree once the action is completed to remove it. Are we all happy with those comments? Yeah. Right. So I'd like to ask for agreement with John's comments that he's made. Are we happy with the rest of the action sheet? Yeah. Anybody against? Any abstentions? No. Fine, thank you very much. That takes us on to agenda item 5, which is on page 17 of the report. And the purpose of this report is to consult members on the new draft Welsh in Education Strategic Plan, or otherwise known as WESP, for 2022 to 2032, I believe it is. Or is it 34? 32? Yeah? On my notes it's 34, but I believe I read 32. There we go. May I welcome Julian Durovchuk, Head of School Improvement, and Dermot McChrystal, Chief Officer Education, to the meeting. And can I ask the officers if they could provide members with a brief overview of the main points within the report, please? You don't need me to tell you that it should be about 10 minutes.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Julian's done the absolute bulk of the work on this, and as you'll see, there's been quite a significant body of work put into the report. As the Chair has just outlined, this is our consultation report. We're in the middle of consultation now. We've begun. Really important to get members' views and thoughts. I'd really, just before I ask Julian to go through some of the key elements in the report, draw your attention to page 18. Section 3.2 particularly, which outlines what this is about. I'm just picking up on the question that John raised, and to follow up on how are we looking at the quality of education and the outcomes, particularly in that case for free school meal learners. You'll notice in 3.2, this report and the WASP is about provision. It's not necessarily about the quality or the impact, but obviously that's something that we're concerned on. But this really is about, as outlined in 3.2, the local authority, our proposals about how we'll carry out our education functions to improve the planning provision of education through the medium of Welsh and improve the standards of Welsh medium education. So it is in there, but the bulk of this is really about provision. Local authorities' targets for improving the planning of the provision of Welsh medium education in its area, and the report of progress that we've made to meet the targets contained in the previous plan, etc. And then obviously this, after the consultation period, goes into Welsh Government for approval, and it's not unusual for us to have a little bit of a tete-a-tete with Welsh Government to get some of that refined. So really, really keen to hear your views today, but I'll hand over to Julian and just take us through some of the key elements in the report. Julian?
Thank you, Dermot. I've tried to highlight the gist of it in the key messages. The clear messaging that's coming through is that overall there is evidence of increasing demand for Welsh medium education provision at both preschool and primary levels. Contained in the report a little bit further on as well as we go through, we have had some issues with parents electing to transfer from Welsh medium into English medium because of difficulties with blended learning and online learning through the medium of Welsh, where both parents, are unable to deliver the learning online. That has now subsided, I'm pleased to say. The number of applications are going down now with the return back to face-to-face learning. The target is the important thing, and that's the real gist to understand behind this, because as Dermot said, it's all about improving the provision and numbers of Welsh medium learners in Torfaen. Now, I've attached in one of the appendices is the Welsh Government guidance, and it goes through how the targets should be calculated. Now, in a nutshell, what they've done is they've taken the number of Torfaen Year 1 learners in 2017-18, and this is consistent across all of the 22 authorities in Wales, as the baseline number. And then they've put two parameters in place, a minimum of +6 percentage points increase and a maximum of +10 percentage points increase. But obviously they would accept increases further than 10%. Nobody would argue against that. Now, the key thing for us is that we have already in place significant expansion planned through 21st century schools. So the main one for us is the expansion of Ysgol Gyfun Gwynclew through to the 3 to 19 provision, and the introduction there of the primary phase and also of nursery provision as well. Now, if we factor in those increases in numbers that we already have, then basically, as you can see from that table in the key messages part, in 2017-18 Year 1, we had 133 learners in Welsh medium, which is 12.1% of the cohort that year. A +6 increase would take us to 18.1. A +10 increase would obviously take us to 22.1. Now, if we factor in that we maximise the capacity of the new provision of Gwynclew, that takes us up to 182 learners in Welsh medium education, which is 18%. Now, the point one is not to be worried about, because basically the 133 data was slightly inaccurate that Welsh Government had used, because it was actually 131, the final PLASC data. So we are coming in at the lower percentage point increase, but that is basically where we are in terms of the planned development around Gwynclew. Now, the bit that we are unsure and we can't mitigate or set targets against is that future planning decisions around any development applications may well influence those figures, because if we have new build and it creates a significant influx into the authority from people outside who then would require Welsh medium education, we may well have to revisit this in the latter half of the 10-year plan. And a lot of authorities have that factored in as well. Our plan is very closely aligned. I've worked very closely with Catherine Morris from Welsh Government on this, and basing it on the way that other authorities have approached the West this year. So we may well have to come back and have a look at and consider further expansion into the Welsh medium sector. Now, allied to this, I've included in Appendix 5, is Welsh Government have introduced a new schools category based on language provision. So whether it's an English medium school at one end of the spectrum or a Welsh medium school on the other end of the spectrum, and then in between you can have Welsh streams, Welsh classes, so much of the curriculum taught through the medium of Welsh. So they would all count as well, and we would have to consider. So that's obviously a consideration for Council, possibly as we move forward and we look at the demand. Factor into that as well that those figures were actually based on the last PLASC data, and since then we have had, as I said, a number of learners who have actually transferred from Welsh medium into English medium because of the difficulties around the blended learning approaches during the pandemic. So it does give us a little bit of wriggle room as well, Chair, in terms of those figures. But the 182 is achievable because it's within the current plans of the Council around the expansion at Gwynclew. So moving on then, we've got additional preschool provision at Ysgol Pantegan Green Meadow. That's now come on stream, and further on in the report you'll see that Panteg, for instance, is now complete and the handover is complete. Green Meadow, the provision is complete, but unfortunately is not actually open at the moment because of COVID. They had insufficient numbers to actually open, but we're expecting that to change as hopefully things get back to normal post-pandemic. The other key points to note in the plan in terms of provision is to look at and research the possible introduction of an immersion centre, late immersion. So these are for learners who would not have come up through Welsh medium nursery and then primary provision. So may want to come into the authority as part of any new development, or may just want to transfer from English medium into Welsh medium. And it's about having a dedicated immersion provision so that those children can actually go in and catch up on the use of languages to be able to then go on into Welsh medium. Now immersion is very much favoured by Welsh Government and planning, and there are many examples of good practice around that. And I'll come back to that in a moment, Chair, because I want to link it in with the provision of a special needs resource base as well. Because currently, if you look at our services provision and support for children in Torfaen, one member of the inclusion team speaks Welsh. Now, if you consider that if I was a dyslexic learner in one of our Welsh medium primaries, dyslexic support for a Welsh language learner through the medium of English just doesn't work. So we're looking at how we can implement a special needs resource base within Torfaen for the first time. Now, our neighbouring authorities are also exploring this at the time, so there may well be an element of joint provision in the first instance moving forward. But we are currently, what we've done, we've set up 3 research projects, if you like. We are using some grant funding that the council receives around rural and small school grants. And we've pulled together 3 small working parties, each chaired by one of our primary Welsh medium heads, because obviously they are the experts in this field. And they've been tasked with going out and producing almost a report for us, which we will obviously bring back in to scrutiny and to council at a future date, on provision of immersion centres and SNRB provision. What would be best for Torfaen, and if it is feasible, and then we would use that as a basis then for a business case to be put forward to Welsh Government for additional funding. Now, Dermot and I have already had some initial meetings with Welsh Government officers around whether the bid would be favourably received, if we put it that way, because obviously there's little point in putting a huge amount of work in if at the end of the day, you know, it's not even going to be considered. And our plans were, I think, Dermot, I could say, were favourably received. So, you know, it's quite encouraging. Now, obviously, that's around capital funding, and there's always the issue then around the revenue funding to support it. But so basically, those are the key messages that underpin the whole premise behind the Welsh in Education strategic plan for us for the next 10 years. I'm confident that we can meet those targets, the 182. Obviously, that depends on further promotion of the Welsh language. It's predicated on as well stopping the movement away from Welsh medium into English medium as a consequence of the pandemic, and that's already underway. But basically, the plan has been very, very detailed and pulled together in a really highly collaborative fashion. If you look at the Welsh Education Forum group, for instance, we had several meetings leading up to drafting the document, and then we actually had an entire full planning day run on Teams where we actually pulled together all the strategies. One of the things that's running at the moment, for instance, we've had subgroups running, is in the use of information for parents from birth onwards, because there's no point in just going from year 4 or year 5 or whatever. So this is looking even how sort of we liaise with health colleagues, health visitors, you know, to promote the benefits of Welsh medium education. So there's a complete raft of strategic planning and thought that's gone into this at every stage. And then obviously as you go through the plan, if you've gone through the plan, you can see then the key elements around improving nursery provision, then improving transfers into primary provision, then transition across from primary into secondary. And obviously a big element of that is improving the standards in Ysgol Gavin Gwynllyu at the moment, because as we're all aware, that school is currently in special measures, but we are putting significant support and investment into the progress of Ysgol Gavin Gwynllyu's recovery, and hopefully, you know, removal from the statutory category without Estyn, because I think that may well influence parental choice as well. So that's the gist of it. I've tried to summarise the report. Chair, I don't know if there's anything in particular you want to pick up on.
Thank you, Julian. You've practically encroached on the questions as well, so you've nearly answered all the questions. But,
I do apologise.
We'll get to the questions now, so thanks very much for that, both of you. And our first set of questions is on the actual development plan. It's what you just touched on. And I'll kick off with who have you consulted with on the development of this plan? You did mention a few of them.
Yeah.
Shall I take my second question? That might be worth having. Have you worked with head teachers, governors in putting this strategy together? So that's the two of those questions. So who have you worked with, and have you worked with head teachers and governors?
Yes. In terms of, if we look at sort of educational settings, first of all, obviously our three primary head teacher colleagues and chairs of governors have been involved. So has the acting head and support head in Ysgol Gyfun Gwynlllyw and the chair of governors there. So in terms of Welsh medium schools and settings, they've been fully involved. We've also included in there as well, because obviously some of our Welsh medium learners may go on to Coleg Gwent, so Coleg Gwent colleagues have been closely involved in it as well. But I've included in the appendices the list of the Welsh Educational Forum. So those are the list of people who have been involved in this. So obviously it's myself, Councillor Richard Clark, Councillor Alan Vernon-Jones, and then we've had a range of people from all the Welsh medium organisations. So Elin Maha, for instance, RAG, which is the parents' organisation, Nia Parker from Mudiad Maithrin, and Harad Wyn Jones from the Urdd, Thomas Hughes from Mentoriaeth, Siona Davis from Mentoriaeth. So the list is there, Chair. So it's a very, very comprehensive list of people who've been involved in pulling this together. And I have to say, coming into this as new, I was really very, very appreciative of the inputs from these people, because they bring the expertise in Welsh language that sadly I don't have as a non-Welsh speaker.
Thank you, Julian. I'm sure we all appreciate the input that others have had, so thank you. Councillor Colette Thomas, you have the next question.
How will we plan to work with parents, learners and the wider community to ensure they support the aspirations laid out in our West Plan?
What we've done with the Welsh Educational Forum, we've actually set up a subgroup specifically for that. So we pulled together a small group to actually look at how we promote and work with parents and learners, and that's literally right from birth through to 25 almost. So we've touched on, although the plan actually deals with ends at 19 and compulsory secondary education at 16. We wanted to look at, if it's going to go on as well for Welsh language and the culture of Welsh post education as well. So what we've actually done, we've looked very, very detailed at how other authorities, so Ceredigion, for instance, Pembrokeshire, and one or two others, on how they've approached communication, for want of a better phrase, with parents, organisations and so on. And what we've done is we've pulled together a report, and the report is sitting there, and our next step is literally in the next week or two, Catherine Evans, the head of Ysgol Gymraeg Cymraeg, who was leading on this for us, and myself and Neil Jones from the council are meeting to look at how we then implement all these new ways of communicating with parents, with the community and all the promotional materials. So it's quite detailed. As you would imagine in this world, it involves the use of a variety of platforms, from small video clips, everything else, but we're actually looking at as well then ensuring that the training that our frontline staff have in the council as well, who may well be approached with a query around Welsh medium education, making sure that we are all well scripted, in terms of the responses and everything. So it's a very, very detailed plan, Councillor Thomas, but it is involving all the latest best practice from around Wales. I wouldn't say from the locality or the region. It's actually from around Wales, because Pembroke have produced some really, really good materials, because obviously there was an authority in special measures, and they have come forward with a lot of really, really good ideas, plus the fact, of course, Pembroke was known as the Little England beyond Wales in my day. My parents or my mother's from Pembroke Dock. So they, like us, are trying to encourage the use of Welsh language in the community as well. So a lot of their promotional materials are really short, sharp, and straight to the point. So we've borrowed all those and are going to sort of take them into our methods of communication. So I hope that's answered your question, Councillor Cox.
You may well have answered Vicky's question as well, but you can ask it, Vicky, instead. Carry on.
As you know, Councillor Sebon, I can literally talk for Wales, so do tell me to
Just
stop.
whether you had the list of questions in front of you.
So my question is, communication engagement will be the key to the success in achieving the aspirations set out within the WESP. How do you plan to take it forward, and have you got an appropriate communication plan in place?
The plan is in draft at the moment, simply because we haven't had the meeting with Neil, because we've got a whole raft of things that we think would be really, really good in the programme. What we have to do now is make sure that they're going to work for us. Because what we don't want to do is just put up, change the title from Pembroke or Pantegan to Torvine and put it out there, and it's not actually going to work for us. It has to work for us as an authority. So what we've got several choices. So the plan is in draft and will need to be firmed up. But the plan literally goes from the materials that health visitors will use in our sort of childcare and early years settings, right the way through. So we've considered every avenue, if you like, so literally from birth onwards, to try and promote in a sensitive way, but to promote the benefits of Welsh medium education. So it is the first time mothers, it is the parents or carers whose child is about to start primary school, who's about to transition into secondary school. So the plan, I think, will work very well for us, but we're in the process of finalising it to make sure that we cover off every aspect. So as we've all been aware through the pandemic, people's use and skills of being able to hold meetings online, access videos, is far better now. So it's about utilising all these new skills and developments as well with the parents.
Thank you, Julian. Thank you, Vicky. It takes us on to the monitoring part of the report now, and I'll ask the question, how regularly will this plan be monitored, evaluated and kept under review?
Well, I think you'll see from the next members' seminar, Councillor Sebon, we've implemented a whole raft of new strategies in terms of monitoring and evaluating within the service. So it'll be ongoing. Good self-evaluation doesn't just happen once a year or on a term. This will be ongoing because certain aspects, are key to it. So obviously, John Tushingham will be closely monitoring the implementation and the handover of the physical building in Ysgol Gowyn Gwynlllyw. I'm working very closely with the schools to look at the curriculum and teaching and learning. So it's going to be ongoing feeding into this. And obviously the analysis of data is going to be key in terms of whether we stop the loss of students from Welsh to English medium. We'll be constantly analysing the available data to look at that. Now, in terms of formal reporting, as with the previous WESP plan, Welsh Government will require a formal annual self-evaluation. And I've included in the pack for you the last formal self-evaluation that we put in, I think it was December 20 for the last WESP plan. So there will be an element of formal reporting to Welsh Government and an element of formal accountability there. But I think it'll be ongoing with us as part of the services self-evaluation throughout the year.
Thank you, Julian. That takes us on to the demand part of the report now. And the question that we have is, in light of the comment made within the second paragraph of 4.6, read the applications for nursery reception classes for 2021, it's been disappointing, leading to the decision to defer until 2022. How can we be sure that the situation will be improved in 2022 and going forward?
Well, I think, although I can say that I think current applications are running at 3 for the nursery for Quintley. So if you like, that's gone up from 1 to 3. Now it's not massive, but obviously we're in the process of rolling out this, for want of a better phrase, recruitment campaign. We have to broadcast and communicate with these parents who think that it may be very, very difficult as a consequence of COVID and distance learning, and moving them away from the Welsh medium decision to the one they actually would like to make, which is send their child to Welsh medium, but overcoming their concerns. And I think this comes back to Vicky Haller's point earlier on around the communication with parents and the reassurance. It is about messaging, and it is about reassuring parents that things are in place that should they decide or go ahead with their decision to come into Welsh medium, that would be the right decision. The support is there, and their child will thrive in Welsh medium. Because I think there was all sorts of difficulties, and unfortunately the pandemic, it did impact on it. But I think the difference, a lot of parents made the decision very early on in the lockdowns and the blended learning decision to move out into Welsh medium, based on the assumption that it would be easier for them to do the online learning. But of course, what they missed out on then was, as in all schools, whether it was English medium or Welsh medium, the quality of blended learning in the later parts of the lockdown was far, far better, because schools had learned on the way and improved, and the support and the blended learning last going off in the Welsh medium schools, was on par with the English medium schools. And, they'd made little videos and everything for parents on how to address things. So I think for some of them, if they'd stuck in there a little bit longer, they probably wouldn't have transferred out. So it is about messaging, and it is about giving the parents the confidence to make that decision. And that comes back to our communication strategy.
Thank you. Councillor Cathy Evans.
Morning, both. Are transfer rates from Welsh nursery to primary and secondary schools a cause for concern? If so, what are the main reasons for this, and what are we planning to do about it?
The transfer rates from nursery into primary, I think, are quite strong. If you look at the figures and the demands, for instance, for Flying Start, they're encouraging. So I think when parents are going into nursery provision and the Flying Start provision, and I think, sometimes it is reputational. If you're going to send your child to Ysgol Gymraeg Cymraeg, for instance, which, was very, very good school, very good reputation, the transfer rates both into that school are very good, but also if you have a look at the figures, the transfer rates out are better than the other schools, because it's a reputational thing. We have had some issues in Pantegan with leadership. They've now been resolved, and I am confident that Pantegan will go from strength to strength, and the new provision at Pantegan will basically be full, because basically the new leadership and the new head teacher has brought a new approach and a new experience, and I think the engagement with parents already has been very, very positive. So from nursery into primary, I don't envisage there being any issues. They will go from strength to strength. And I think added into that as well, we've got 21st century schools funding going into our Welsh medium primaries as well. So whilst we haven't got any new build as such, we've got refurbishments going on. And I think when people see money being invested into buildings and resources as well, it's always a positive thing, isn't it? Somebody builds a new school in your area and it's got all the latest facilities, it is an encouragement to go there. So I think in the primary sector, I think it's fine. The secondary school, of course, coming back to reputation, the fact that the school is in special measures, the fact that Newport now has a provision in Ysgoed, just across the border, which is now developed right the way through to GCSE. it is inevitable that some parents will vote with their feet, and go elsewhere. But of course, we are working incredibly hard with both the EAS, the school, to get that school out of special measures as quickly as possible. And it's been a difficult journey, but I think the last Estin inspection, monitoring visit in the summer, has started to recognise green shoots. So progress is starting to be made. I think, the changes that have been made are certainly improving systems in the school. So I think it's going to take time. I wouldn't wish to, give you a false impression that it's going to be easy, because it's not, and it's not going to be instant. However, I think once people see the reputational changes that are going on in the school, they see the new build again. And not only that, then they see the planning of a continuum of learning for their child from nursery right the way through to 19, and they can and the clear messaging around that. I think eventually we'll be back to a strong situation where transfers from primary into secondary, will more or less be the norm.
Thank you. Dermot, you got a comment?
Yeah, Chair, just to add to Julian's contribution there, I think the other important thing, Julian, is that we have also initiated a new partnership framework with both Monmouthshire and Blaenau Gwent.
Yeah.
So we've now agreed that we'll come together as an education partnership with the school to look at strategic planning and to look at how we can support even better relationships between the feeder primaries in those local authorities, and look strategically at planning for the continuation of the school. Going through, itself obviously is the feeder school for the Blaenau Gwent Monmouthshire primary. So we're working at a regional level too to make sure that those transfer rates are as good as they possibly can be, looking to see how we can get the support of partners in those other authorities, and obviously reaching out to those parents and stakeholders in those authorities too. So really trying to join everything up to make sure that Good Include really has all that support that it needs, but also it has, that strategic vision shared by the three authorities.
Thank you, Dermot. Are you happy with that answer, Kath? Yep. I've got Councillor Janet Jones's question next, and as she's otherwise engaged, I'll ask it for her. And it's, how will we improve on the numbers of learners aged between 16 to 19 studying through the medium of Welsh? And should we consider providing grants as an incentive to encourage young people to study Welsh further?
In terms of curriculum provision post-16, part of the ongoing developments at Gwynclew is we are now working very closely with Welsh medium schools in other neighbouring local authorities. So, for instance, Ysgol Cwmrymni, for instance, Gwent Ysgwyd, to look at utilising the new blended learning approaches to online learning, so that we can run courses from Cwmrymni and courses from Ysgwyd, for instance, to learners in Gwynclew, and vice versa. So we're actually looking to expand the curriculum offer. Now, one of the limiting factors with post-16, and it's not an issue just in Torfaen, this is a national issue which, all Welsh medium schools secondary schools are trying to address, is that the breadth and balance of courses specifically through the medium of Welsh is very narrow compared to those in English medium post-16 provisions, and quite often around the vocational ones as well. So whereas you might in an English medium sixth form have somebody staying on and maybe doing 1 or 2 A levels and some level 3 qualifications in a more vocational aspect, they are currently not available in many qualifications. So we're working on that aspect to broaden the curriculum offer to make it more enticing to stay on. We're also working with Coleg Gwent in terms of the Torfaen Learning Zone to look at if there are any courses that could be made available through the medium of Welsh as well. So we're working closely with those. And you can see from coming back to the West Plan itself, Coleg Gwent is looking to address Welsh language issues within its staffing, which would enable those courses to run as well, so as part of the overall plan. And I think in terms of the transition rates then as well from year 11 into year 12, coming back to all the things we've said as well about making sure that the school is successful in delivering those standards to those children in year 11, so that the natural progression is for them to stay on and go on into the sixth form. So in terms of post-16, it's a little more difficult to control because some of the aspects are literally beyond our control, although we are lobbying Welsh Government around the curriculum and curriculum for Wales. But it is about making sure that the learner in Key Stage 4 sees the value of staying on into Key Stage 5 and trying to maximise, even under current restrictions, the curriculum offered by working in collaboration with the college and with other Welsh medium schools in the region.
Thank you. And Sir Cathy Evans, you've got the next two questions. So.
Yeah, I think I may ask these questions together because I have a feeling that they may be linked.
Yeah.
So the first one is, what are the main reasons for the decline in pupils coming from Ysgol Ifenni? And the second one is, how have we taken into account the new Welsh medium secondary school in Newport and the impact that that may have on our school numbers going forwards?
Ifenni, for instance, this year sent 10 pupils into Year 7 in September. It has been a gradual decline. We have had discussions with Monmouth over the reasons as to why this has happened. One of the reasons is also that they are experiencing a number of pupils transferring out of Welsh medium into English medium as well, because obviously for Ifenni they have the option of sending their children to King Henry VIII School. Now, King Henry VIII School in Abergavenny is, an excellent school. And I believe, and I wouldn't confirm this, but I believe, I know they're going 3 to 19 expansion as well, but they're also looking at offering, under the new Welsh language categorisation scheme, more courses through the medium of Welsh. So that may well be influencing parents' decisions about sending them to King Henry. But as Dermot alluded to earlier on, we are negotiating, we're not negotiating, we're in the process of re-establishing the partnership agreement with Monmouth and Blaenau Gwent in terms of transfer rates and provision into Welsh medium. Now, Blaenau Gwent, to be fair, is not an issue. The primary school, Brynhawd and Blaenau Gwent, sent 27 learners this year into the Gwynllw Year 7. So transfer rates, are still strong from Blaenau Gwent, but Ifenni is the issue. But that is the underlying issues around that one, Councillor Evans. The second part, can you just remind me what the second question was, please, Councillor Evans?
Yeah, certainly. How have we taken into account the new Welsh medium secondary school in Newport and the impact that this may have on our school numbers going forward?
Obviously, we've been aware, we've been tracking numbers of transfers across, but in terms of the actual pupil admission limits for Gwent Ysgol as well, they're close to capacity with their own provision. So theoretically, if they hit their pupil admission limit, they're going to have to seek dispensation to go above those limits. Currently, we don't have huge numbers, very, very few, in fact, requesting to transfer to Gwent Ysgol. The issue has been transfers out into English medium schools, because parents don't want to then put their child necessarily on one or two buses and transfer across into into a neighbouring local authority. Although you would expect as a secondary age pupil, they're probably more inclined to do that, but it's not happening. So for two reasons, I think the transfers tend to be out into English medium, and it is the issue of the pupil admission limit within Gwent Ysgol as well. So I think that the main problem with the Gwent Escoed opening as a seedling school and growing was the impact on staffing, because Welsh medium staffing, basically it is a real concern for all Welsh medium schools. The staff are simply not out there. So when a new school opens, and some of your better staff leave to join that's been the bigger impact, to be honest, not so much on pupil numbers, but on staffing. Sorry, Councillor Seaborn, you're on mute.
That was because my husband came in the room and I muted it. Thanks. Jess, you have the next two questions.
Thank you. Yeah, again, I'll ask them together because one has been pretty covered already. So it was, how are we planning to further promote the WESP and Welsh medium provision that is offered within Torfaen? And how will we look to provide support for parents to enable them to engage with and assist their children through Welsh medium education?
I think the first part, Jessica, is basically that through the communication strategies that we've already, I've already gone through. I don't think I've got much more to add to that. I think what's been interesting as a development, though, and this is a real strength, and in response to the second question, is that I alluded to the development of blended learning throughout the pandemic, where, in the beginning it was very much related to well-being and safeguarding, and then gradually the learning built in. Our provision now for blended learning is one that the schools are looking to continue through into normal everyday practice. So, for instance, I think I mentioned it earlier on, what our schools have been doing is providing short little video clips, for instance, for parents to support with homework, for instance. So if a child comes home with a Welsh language homework, and I'm an English medium parent, for want of a better description, then it's, how do I support my child in that learning? So the schools are now very, very much better at providing not just the work for the learner, but the support for the parents in how to approach it. And it's not just the schools. There's been a big push from organisations, Welsh language charities, Welsh Government itself, the region as well, to provide information and support materials to enable parents to support their child when they're learning at home. So whilst the pandemic has had, significant detrimental effects, on people personally and on learning in specific aspects, it's also had many positives. And I think it's actually moved teaching and learning forward significantly through the use of new technologies and the ability to communicate with parents. And I think, all schools now have apps, for instance, which parents can just contact the school straight away if they have a concern or if they have a particular difficulty with something. So I think, the level of collaboration between schools and home, and especially around teaching and learning, are now significantly improved. And we are actively encouraging, schools, as we have done with ourselves as a service. We've looked at how we've changed our service delivery models around support to schools and reviewed it to make sure that we capture the real positives out of that and carry those forward in future to improve support. So I'm actually quite encouraged now around those developments. And obviously, as part of our school development plan, professional conversations, as we're calling them, with the schools, we will be picking up with schools just this. It's about how are you taking the positives out of the blended learning experience into your planning in your work with parents. So I hope that's answered your question.
Thank you, Dermot.
Answer that. Thank you. I think there's an important point here as well, though, about expectations around what schools can be expected to do and what they're resourced to do. So, notwithstanding everything that Julian said, and I think we've all learned so much over this last 18 months about all sorts of things. But in terms of blended learning, I think there's been fantastic progress by parents, I actually do add, as well as by schools. But if we are talking about, really offering more support, then we get into a conversation, and I hope this will come out in the consultation, and I do hope parents contribute to this, about what do they see as a good network of support for them? What would that mean in terms of community learning? Are there other things that we need to do, maybe linking in with Colleague Gwent, and obviously how we could go about funding some work, because at the moment that's not within the remit that we have. So there's always more we can do. I think, this is a really good opportunity for the community to tell us what they think it looks like, what good looks like for them. But there are other things we can do if the demand is there, and if we can really look at how we resource that. Again, something we're keen to talk to Welsh Government about, in terms of how, as a nation, we're really keen, and really clear that we want to reach our 2050 target. This is more than just what we're doing at the moment. It has to be other things that we haven't done already. And everyone's consultation around the WESPs gives us an opportunity maybe to explore some of those new bits of support that we haven't thought about already.
Thank you, Dermot. Welcome, Janet. I know you've been very busy already this morning. We're just going into the teaching workforce. So I've asked one of your questions, but you've got a couple left. So just to bring you up to date. So we're going into the questions for the teaching workforce. And Councillor Evans, you have this first question on this one.
Yeah, Julian, I don't think I can let you know how worried we are about teaching staff in Welsh medium schools in Torfaen. We are so concerned about it. Almost every time we get together, we are talking about it and trying to see if we can, what are we going to do about this? So what are we planning to do to attract Welsh teaching staff to work in our schools, particularly ALN staff?
I think you're right. It's not just teaching staff though. It's support staff as well. So I'll cover both, but I'll talk to the teaching one first of all. Basically, we've been, I think, every local authority, and I know Dermot has strongly through ADU, lobbied Welsh Government that this has to be high up on the national agenda. So when they're working with initial teacher training universities and so on, it's about the recruitment of suitably experienced or qualified people to go into Welsh language as a teaching profession, because the numbers are simply not coming through there. And one of the sort of barriers, for instance, that there's the Sabbatical Scheme. Now, the Sabbatical Scheme is meant to be that basically a teacher can take on a 12-month sabbatical scheme to train to teach through the medium of Welsh, to enhance their use of Welsh language in their teaching. Now, bear in mind, we're a region of 5 local authorities. We have a cap in South East Wales currently of 15 candidates per year across 5 authorities. So what message is that sending out? So that's typical of the things that we're trying to change, and change very, very quickly, because we are acutely aware, whether it's teaching staff, ALN, or head teachers, we're trying to recruit for Gwyn Clew now. It's incredibly difficult to get people into Welsh medium education with the relevant experience and knowledge. We are strongly, I wouldn't say barraging, but obviously going back to Welsh Government all the time with this as a critical issue. And I know Dermot is doing this literally every ADU meeting, and it's not just Dermot, but every other, director in every other authority is feeling that. Now, we are trying to be proactive, and I'm not going to take any credit for this, but for instance, some of the actions we're trying to make is Dr. Matthew Dickin, our new head in Pantegan, approached me 2 weeks ago. He's been working with the 2 other primary head colleagues in Welsh medium, because they are really, really struggling to get Welsh language teaching assistants. They just can't get them. So he has put a proposal together that I've sent into Colleague Gwent to look at if Colleague Gwent can implement a gap year strategy and almost grow our own from within the Coleg Gwent by promoting it, giving it a qualification base. Now that's very, very, very much in its infancy, Councillor Evans. It is literally hot off the press in the last couple of weeks, and we're waiting now to have the meeting with representatives from Coleg Gwent to take that forward. But I've also shared it with Catherine Morris and Welsh Government, and they were very, very interested. So Dermot and I, in our conversations, one of the steps after the meeting with Coleg Gwent is to go back to Welsh Government and say, look, if Coleg Gwent can get this off the ground and running for us in our area, are you prepared to fund it? Because the next thing is going to be, even if it's just transport costs to work at the work experience placements or whatever. So it's about, as Dermot alluded to, is that putting the funding into it to make it attractive as well. So I think we are trying everything that is physically possible to do or to get the number of people recruited into school. You know, I mentioned Dr. Dickin in Pantegan. I think, you know, the field was very, very small for that. You know, and it's a relatively new build. It's an attractive school, and yet, you know, attracting the candidates into that was very, very difficult. So it is something we are acutely aware of, Councillor Evans, and we are doing our very best to recruit. And now we are going down the route that, well, if we can't recruit, we're going to try and grow our own. And we're working obviously very closely with the EAS in this one as well, because obviously the EAS are the ones who provide all the training and sign off and everything as well. So the EAS are aware of this as well.
Thank you, Julian. David, we've got a few questions on staffing. Do you want to hang on till the end and then cover them? Okay, yeah. I'll carry on. So, Councillor Jones, please. The next question 2 on staffing.
Can you tell me, Dermot, if we should consider offering incentives to try and attract Welsh medium teaching staff to work within our schools? Obviously, Julian's obviously said a little bit of it, an incentive from the head of Ysgol Pantegan, but should we be trying to use other methods and incentives to attract people, because we've got a desperate shortage, as we all are aware.
Right, we go to John Killick next. John?
Yeah, right. Yeah, the short question is, how can we ensure that the most appropriate staff are employed within our schools? If I could just put a context to that, if it's becoming very, very difficult to find staff that are able to do that, it may well be that we only have one applicant for that post. Now, I'm not averse to one applicant, because if that person is the best person for the job, then we may have lost them by the time we re-advertise. What I am concerned about is, how will we support schools if they interview one person? And I don't think it's really the interview. I'm not a big fan of interviews. I'm a bigger fan of the teacher observation part of it. So how would we support the school if the school sees an aspiring teacher and says, actually, this person isn't very good? It becomes very difficult if there's only one person at your interview to then say, well, we're not having you. And I'm wondering what support we can offer to schools to make that difficult decision.
You want to take those couple, Dermot, and then we'll go on to the others.
If I pick these up, and Julian might want to come in terms of incentives, it goes back to the point I think that Julian's already made, which is that we're in competition with staff, with authorities and other schools, not only in this region but across the whole of South Wales, really. So lots of our staff already travel from places like Cardiff, drive past 4 or 5 schools on the way to get to Gwynclw or Pantegan or wherever they're going. So we're in a really big sort of competition with everyone around us. And some authorities, some schools are already using incentives. We've chosen to do that on one occasion so far. So we've certainly put a market incentive in place for the Gwynclw head teacher post, which I believe has come back out to Outfit now. And it's something we keep under active consideration. The issue for us as an authority and as for schools is that in the schools formula there isn't a mechanism to give extra funding to schools, so it creates a pressure again, either for individual governing bodies or for us as an authority. So it's not without difficulty, and clearly once we put an incentive in for one post, we need to be mindful of differentials and of equity. So if we give one person an incentive, you know, there could be a knock-on impact across the system that makes it very expensive very quickly. So short answer is we're considering it. In specific instances, we've used it and we're not ruling it out, but it will create a pressure. And that's something that we might have to reflect back in budget discussions going forward over the years ahead. In terms of, John, coming back to your point, I think I know where you're coming from in terms of one applicant, if they're really good. You know, I agree with you. Any school faced with a vacancy to fill needs to find the right candidate. So in terms of making sure that if there's 10 candidates or one who've applied, we have got a good system in place, I would suggest, both with colleagues from the EAS cells and HR, offering advice to that governing body. And if that person has the right skill set, there are ways that we can, and experience, we can obviously support that governing body in making the appointment. And we have appointed people in the past when there's been one applicant, but equally we've obviously gone back out in some instances. So it very much depends on the circumstances, but it's not beyond, you know, it's within our process to appoint someone if they've been the only candidate, and we have done that, certainly. So, Joe, I'm not sure I fully understand the question because you were breaking up a little bit. I hope that answers the query.
Yeah, the second part of it was really, it's a difficult decision to say, right, well, we've looked at you particularly doing your teaching when you came for interview. We didn't actually think very much of it. So we don't actually want to appoint you. You're the only person here for the interview. It's a difficult decision, I think, for a school to make and for that governing body to make. And I'm just wondering what support we can offer to those schools to make at times that difficult decision, because I think the HR person that you referred to isn't actually going to be the person who saw that piece of teaching. It'll be a member of staff. The HR person will see the interview part of it. So it is about how we support them to make what I think is a very difficult decision when you're turning away a person who is the only candidate.
Yeah, so advice is always available, either from Julian or myself or from the school improvement partner for the school. So if there are concerns about quality of teaching, particularly, and let's be honest, this has been the focal point of every discussion we've had, the committee's had with us as officers, because our whole raison d'etre is to improve the quality of teaching in every classroom. So if there's an issue about someone cannot achieve the standard that's required, or doesn't demonstrate it, and that's two different things perhaps, then that's the discussion we would have and support in the discussion with the governing body or with the head teacher, and that advice is always available. If someone clearly doesn't reach the standard for teaching, and there's no evidence in their application or through the whole process, then they shouldn't be appointed. If it's someone who's maybe had a bad observation, but through other aspects of the application and from the references and with the right support, the head teacher and governing body feel that that person could be appointed, we'll certainly support them in doing so and have that discussion if we're asked to. So look, what we say to all schools, and again, over the last 18 months, we've worked really, really closely with schools, is come and talk to us. If you're stuck with an issue or you've got a concern, pick up the phone. And I'm really pleased to say, that's really grown over this last 18 months. And maybe in a subsequent item, we've just done a satisfaction survey with schools in terms of how they see the education service, but also allied services and support to schools. We've had some really strong feedback on that, positive feedback. So I think schools now feel really well supported. And Chair, that's something that we're just looking at the moment, and so something we'll obviously feedback to committee for their information once that's prepared. So, Joe, I think it's there. I know what you're talking about, and certainly been instances in the past. I think we've moved on. I think heads know where to come and get advice if they haven't got it readily available.
Thank you.
Thank you. Colette, you've got your next question.
Chair.
How many teaching vacancies have we got currently within our Welsh medium schools?
Julian,
I'm
that's
in,
something I think we have. Is it ready to hand? We'd have to ask HR for that information and come back to it, Councillor Thomas. I think, Julian, yeah?
yeah, we've currently got, I know we have one advert out in one of our primary schools for a teaching post. We've got no other adverts out currently in the other primaries. With Gwynflew, we've managed to cover off the curriculum in terms of staffing, but we've had to go to Estyn for agreement on this because some of them are basically further education trained or whatever, coming back to John's point in some respects, but a slightly different version is the fact that they actually don't have the correct teaching qualification. You know, their qualification is teaching in further ed, but you know, it was a case of not being able to deliver the curriculum or have that or have an NQT, because obviously a school in special measures shouldn't have NQTs either. But Gwynflew has a number of NQTs because they were the only people who they could recruit. But Estyn are the stopgap checking mechanism for that, because the school has to write to Estyn for express permission to appoint an NQT or whatever in Gwynflew, and they have to provide details of how that teacher will be supported through their induction program and everything by the EAS. So it's quite a rigorous process there. But in terms of the absolute numbers of vacancies at the moment, I don't have that information to hand. Sorry, Councillor Thomas.
Thank you.
And I've just asked for that, so we'll get that through to you as soon as we get that information in from HR. Thomas, thanks.
Thanks very much for that. Councillor Jones, you've got your next question, question 5.
Thanks, Chair. How are we working with consortiums like the EARS to attract Welsh teachers into our schools, into our area?
Basically, obviously, when we have a vacancy, the advert goes out. Most schools these days use, the online advertising. They've moved away from the Times Educational Supplement, but there are actually specific Welsh medium platforms to advertise on. Now, it is something Dermot and I are working with to address at the moment, because, for instance, the advert I alluded to with Ysgol Gymraeg Cymraeg, for instance, went out on eTeach and didn't go out on the Welsh medium platform. And then when the head asked for it to go out on the Welsh medium platform, they were told there'd be a charge of £125, whereas eTeach is part of the service level agreement. So there are issues in the system that we are looking to address, because, again, you know, when you're trying to recruit, you want to put it out as broad and as wide as possible. And especially for Welsh medium, you know, it needs to go out on all the available Welsh medium platforms. So it's something we are working towards as we speak, Councillor Jones, on that one. And just to add, you know, with the Gwynflew headship, for instance, we even went down the route of using a recruitment agency to try and cast the net further and wider.
Thank you. Thank you, Julian. You'll be pleased to know this is the last question, and Councillor Cathy Evans has it.
How are we planning to support and encourage teaching staff within our English medium schools to take up Welsh in an attempt to increase bilingualism? Can we encourage school staff with basic Welsh to train to an advanced level and move into our Welsh medium schools?
I think we've alluded to the one point already, is the Sabbatical Scheme. You know, the 15 cap across the 5 local authorities. You know, we have representatives on that every year. You know, we've currently got staff on there from Blenheim comes to mind, and Coed, you know, who are undertaking the sabbatical. So we communicate that out to staff, because it's not just about, obviously it would be good if we could get some stuff to transfer across, but the ability to use Welsh language and teach through the medium of Welsh language are two very, very different things. You know, if I'm a teacher in an English medium primary and I'm using Welsh language in circumstances outside the classroom, to address those particular issues, then that is very, very difficult to teaching a numeracy lesson through maths, through Welsh, for instance. So, but I think the simple answer is there is not a huge opportunity for staff to retrain at the moment. And I think, again, it's supplying what value would it be? Now, for instance, it could be that if it was for a promoted post, you could see that working. So if I am a fluent Welsh speaker and able to teach through the medium of Welsh, and I'm currently in an English primary job, and an assistant head role or deputy head role or head of department role comes up, then they might have to, or they might want to, for their own career progression, do that. But it comes back down to the whole national approach, I think, to retraining and the sabbatical scheme. And I think once that gets remedied, I think we may see, and I use the word may, we may see, people transfer across.
Chair, if I can, just to add to that, I think it's a really good question, because the whole point of the consultation, as I mentioned earlier, is to try and inspire new thinking and new ideas. And one of the challenges, I think, as Julian said, is we don't have that much provision at the moment, but this is a national issue. And so some of the issues coming up in our discussion today will be reflecting back into Welsh Government, because we may not be well positioned to do some of this by ourselves. So providing staff who've got a level of Welsh who need to improve that level to go and teach in Welsh medium requires either us to put that training on outside work hours and people then finding the time outside work hours to improve their Welsh, or to provide...
I've lost you, Dermot. Sorry.
Oh, am I still
there?
We're back, sorry. Look, there. So we might have to look at supply costs, and those are quite considerable if we want to allow people time during the school day to improve their Welsh. So these are big ticket items that an authority on a scale just isn't resourced to do, but it's something I think we might need to think about, absolutely think about, and go back to Welsh Government to say, well, how can you support us in this endeavour? And it won't just be us, it'll be the Kerry Diggins of this world as much as the Monmouthshires and Torvines as well.
Thank you very much. That concludes our questions. Well, I'm echoing by here, so have everybody got their microphone off? Right. Thank you, officers. Thank you, Julian. Thank you, Dermot, for your contribution. You can now go and have a cup of coffee while we determine our recommendations. Thanks very much. Bye-bye. Okay, Leanne, are we there? Yep. Okay, so can I remind members that we've been asked of the scrutiny to consider when coming to their recommendations, we've been asked to consider the contents of the Welsh in Education Strategic Plan, consider the progress made in relation to the previous plan, and to make comments and recommendations to the Executive Member Chief Officer where appropriate. So do members have any recommendations that they would like to make on the report? I've scribbled a couple of things down, but if I can find them. Did you pick anything up, Leanne?
Nothing really, Chair. No.
I picked one up on demand on question 3, which was the question I asked for Councillor Jones and the promotion of the 16 to 19. I think, yeah, I don't know whether there's a recommendation there that we can recommend that we look at promotion to 16 and 19 Welsh education. Yeah. They did say that it was being looked at with Coleg Gwent and what have you, but can we actually recommend that they go with that? And the other one was question 1 on the staffing, which Dermot's just actually taken on board, I think, but it wouldn't hurt for this committee to recommend that they take it to Welsh Government on Councillor Evans's question on the first question of ALN staff and training. Colette, you've got something to come into?
I think they've made really good progress on the consultation, and I'd be very interested to see the I think he's going to bring a report back to us, is he, on the communication strategy?
Yeah.
So I think they've made good progress on that. We look forward to seeing that working with our comms team.
Mm-hmm. Councillor Janet Jones? Sorry, your microphone.
Sorry. One of my last questions about how they are concerned about getting shorted and using Welsh media. As he said, it was expensive to go through the Welsh media. But if we want teachers in our area, we have to explore all possibilities, don't we? And no matter what expense, and perhaps urge Welsh Government to put more funding. They want us to get these numbers up in the next couple of years, and without funding, we are going to find it extremely difficult, aren't we?
I agree. And there was a question, Cathy, you asked it on the last question that Dermot said that you would be taking to Welsh Government. Do you have any recommendations? I don't want to put you on the spot, but...
No, I think I'd like to recommend that we somehow look at increasing the number of English medium teachers who are able to, was it sabbatical?
Yeah.
Is that what the word they used was? Sabbatical, wasn't it? So, you know, over 15, over 5, you know, that's only 3 a year that we can then, we need to be able to send more. So we need to approach Welsh Government and ask for more places to become available so that we can encourage the English medium teachers who have a basic level of Welsh to move across, do some work, increase their Welsh and be able to teach in it. Because we've got great teachers in English medium who can speak Welsh, who could move over if they have the Welsh skills and really help out in our Welsh medium schools.
Mm-hmm. And Janet Jones, you've still got your...
No, sorry, Chair, I've put my hand down. Apologise.
Colette?
Yeah, I think my question would be, comments actually to the executive member would be to ask him to continue to lobby Welsh Government as hard as he can for extra funding and support with the plan going forward.
Okay. Any other comments or questions or recommendations? Leanne, you okay with all those? Yeah, and just let her catch up with her scribbles a minute. When you're ready, we go on to agenda item 6, which is the work programme. Leanne, would you like to go through the report?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Chair. It's a very short report from me, as per members' previous requests. It's really provided with all the relevant information so you can determine your next item going forward. As you can see, members, there's currently been nothing identified on the executive member forward plan at the moment for education, but obviously this will be updated and presented back to you at your next meeting and every meeting thereafter. The same applies really for the audit committee referrals, any external audits that have recently been carried out. Nothing has come through for education again as yet, but I will keep you informed on progress going forward.
Is that because there isn't a forward work programme or because they haven't caught up with it?
The executive forward plan, you mean? No, all chief officers now and officers within individual service areas, they have a template which they have to update. Everyone's got access to it, so as soon as a key decision needs to be made, every chief officer's got a responsibility to go in and populate the spreadsheets. So coming up to your next meeting now, I'll just dip into that spreadsheet and pick anything out for education.
Brilliant. Okay, Kath, do you want to come in?
Yeah, sorry, it was about the previous agenda item. On my question about the ALN staff, Leanne, you know, they're talking about building an SNRB base in Welsh medium, which I think is much, much needed. And, you know, I'm really excited to hear that. But how are they going to staff it?
Yeah.
How on earth are they going to staff this when they don't have the ALN staff currently that they need in Welsh medium schools? They really need to be looking at the specialist staff, the ALN staff, the staff who have special skills, because just recruiting a basic teaching assistant seems to be almost impossible at the moment in Welsh medium. So, employing a group of teaching assistants in Welsh medium who are well versed and trained in ALN in order to run an NRB base is going to be a really tall order.
Something I brought up yesterday in yesterday's meeting, Leanne, about the social work staff where we retention and recruitment. Perhaps that we need to bring those into our recommendations as well, that they look at some kind of retention and recruitment scheme.
Excuse me, Chair.
Yeah.
Chair, I also yesterday mentioned that maybe we an SNRB base should be a bilingual one, where we have English medium staff running the SNRB base attached to a Welsh medium school, where young people and children and young people can switch between as needed, just to get the ALN cover in, so that the ALN provision and support is there for the children and young people until we can completely employ Welsh speaking staff in there.
That's a good point. So, okay. Sorry, we've just jumped back, Leanne, but did you pick those up? So the next one that we've got on our agenda is the self-evaluation report, or self-evaluation plan, as they call it. Are we all happy to take that as our next agenda item? I think we need to get into self-evaluation quite deeply in this meeting, so I'd agree with that. So everybody happy to take self-evaluation? Anybody with any other burning issues that they need to bring up? No? Okay. Can I thank you for your contributions this morning? The date of the time of the next meeting is the 24th of November. I believe it's probably 10 o'clock, Bian, as usual.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Can I thank you all for your attendance and thank you for your contributions this morning. Have a lovely day.